Hello everyone, this is Gex Talk number 18, and today we have a guest. Introduce yourself, mate.
My name is Ari Nagel, and I have 69 children. I'm from New York City. I teach mathematics and computer science in Brooklyn, and I'm excited to be on the show.
Well, thank you.
Thanks.
You go, Eddie.
Well, yeah, that's a pretty big number. 69 children. Wow.
Yeah.
So,
Well, actually, my parents, I have 27 nieces and nephews. So my parents are right now at 96 grandchildren. So they're going to hit 100 because I have 11 kids on the way. I have women pregnant in New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Pennsylvania, Maryland, North Carolina, South Carolina, Texas, and California. These are just different states around the U.S.
Yeah. Damn, that's a lot. Get around.
Yep, I got to see quite a few of them over the weekend. I'm actually in the car right now on my way back from North Brunswick, and I saw my kids from Philadelphia. I had twins born in December of 2018, and their big sister, and then also I had two daughters that I spent the weekend with at a slumber party, and then another one from South Jersey that I got to see this weekend. Plus, I made the rounds. I had a circumcision on Thursday. That I went to also in New Jersey, that I went to visit my folks, and that just made the rounds and visited a whole bunch of kids. And then all the while also trying to help women conceive. They reach out to me when they're ovulating. So I met a woman from Jersey City, then another woman from Trenton, and then a woman from Philly this weekend.
yeah, you do get around then.
Yeah, it's funny because some days I don't do anything the whole day, but then it's like, well, at least I made a baby today, so that's something productive.
Yeah, making progress.
Yeah. Do you ever think that in the future people are going to look back at you like Genghis Khan with all the descendants running around?
I doubt that, but obviously, if I'm already at 80 if you include the 11 kids that I have on the way. And if each of my kids have 80, and then each of those kids have 80, then roughly, I think, I don't know, I got to do the math. What's 80 cubed? It's probably 500,000.
Man, it's crazy.
Damn.
No, I was thinking like, say, thousands of years down the line, you'd be related to so many people then, like the ancestor. That'd be crazy.
I think Genghis Khan had in the thousands. Right, so I'm not quite there yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm up there. I'm with like the leader of the Church of Latter-day Saints, and some Mormons have around this much, and then some people from emperors of the Thai emperor and things like that. So there was quite a few people that had more children than me. And then of course, obviously, there's anonymous donors that are having more children than me as well.
Yeah, I saw somebody say that on one of the comments on that documentary. Was it the New York Post in November or whatever on YouTube?
Yes, New York Post released a documentary on YouTube, but it's not. I don't know if you can call that a documentary. That's a bit of a stretch. I mean, it's the New York Post. It's a bit of a tabloid.
Yeah. Oh, the series or whatever. But yeah, no, a lot of the people in there were saying in the comments that there are people, anonymous ones, that have more that don't publicize it, but it's crazy. Have you seen that film?
Well, they don't know. There's no one keeping track when you go to a sperm clinic to donate sperm that way. No one keeps track of how many of those actually turned into children. It's not like they're keeping that information private. No one's actually keeping track of how many of them actually turn into children. So they might sell the sperm to someone, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it actually worked. So someone could donate hundreds of times, and of course there's no database. So if I donate to one clinic and then I could go to 5 other clinics, I mean, there's dozens of clinics in New York City that I could be donating to anonymously. No one's really keeping track of how many or who I donated to or putting any limit on it. There's guidelines of protocols that's recommended, but nothing's really enforced.
Yeah. Damn.
So, just just came to mind. But didn't you get like banned from donating in Israel or something?
I did. You know, every country has different laws of what's acceptable. So I was going to share that. What was your question? Oh, about Israel. Yeah. So the truth is that a lot of countries require marriage in order to have a child. So, Israel's not one of those countries. So what Israel allows is they allow anonymous donations. That's permitted, and then they also allow people to donate where you know who the person is, but they have to accept parental responsibility. So as long as they agree to be a father to the child. So you have to sign a contract with the mother about how you're going to, share custody or anything along those lines, and that's allowed. So you don't have to be married in order to go to a fertility clinic. They do have this avenue, but you have to accept parental responsibility, which I did. So I went to Israel, and I froze for 6 different women, and I signed these contracts to comply with the law. The only problem is that I did a newspaper article, or I did some media out there, and the Ministry of Health found out that say, wait a minute, this is not in the spirit of the law. And then that's why they banned me. They said you can't possibly be a parent to these 6 different women that you're conceiving. And then they heard how many children I had. They said, wait a minute, you're banned. So the woman who I was trying to help, as well as the 6 women that I already froze for, obviously were devastated. I mean, obviously it was not as devastating for me as it was for them. I already had a lot of children, and it wasn't that big an issue for me, but obviously my heart went out to the women that I went out there to help grow their families, and they one of them sued the government, saying they didn't really have a right. Obviously we're 2 adults, we're consenting adults, and we should be allowed to choose who we're raising children with. So she sued, and it went to the district court, and then it went all the way to the Supreme Court. But ultimately, in the end, the Supreme Court sided with the government, saying they do have the right to decide who you should have a child with. So we did end up losing. Of course, we could have appealed it, but the real issue is they won so many delays, and they basically won the case that way, because by the time the woman was 43, and then she said, wait a minute, if I do the final appeal to go to the full Supreme Court, because it just went to a tribunal of 3 of them, she would have been too old in order to actually have any success anyway, so she would have needed an egg donor. So at that point she gave up, and she doesn't have any children. And then the other women that I was supposed to help ended up using anonymous donors, so it's not like they ended up finding a father for their children anyway. They found anonymous frozen sperm where they won't even know who the father is. In Israel, the law is if you use sperm in Israel, you'll never know who the child is. So a lot of them purchase sperm from outside the country, where at 18 it's possible to know who the father's going to be if the father agrees. Obviously in 18 years a lot can happen, and the men can change their mind, but they're open to it at the time of donation, that they agree to be contacted at 18. Of course, it's really just going to be an email that's generated that they can then decide not to respond to. But a lot of them purchase sperm for much more money than it would cost in Israel from abroad, just for the fact that maybe the child might know who the father is. Of course, now I think with 23andMe and Ancestry.com, it's probably going to be much easier to find out who your father is.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I actually got a question for you. When did you start, like, I don't know, getting into this or whatever? Like, start doing this? Like, what age?
Last week I celebrated my son's birthday, and he turned 12. So it's really been around a dozen years. Of course, I started obviously 9 months prior to that.
Yeah.
So I do have a son who's 16. I have a son who's 16 years old, but that was not in the context of donation. My donation started 12 years ago. He was born August 1st.
Yeah.
So I had 68 children in the past 12 years.
Yeah. Okay.
Wow.
Damn.
Yeah.
Well, I was really doing around 2 or 3 a year for the first few years, but then it started to get busy. So, for example, in 2020, I'll have 20 kids. Obviously, if they all deliver on their due date, we're due to have 20. Of course, I got lucky with 2 sets of twins, so that helped my numbers. But that would be my best year yet. I've never had 20 children in 1 year.
Jeez, that's heaps.
Yeah. I noticed that I read an article the other day when looking into it to try and get some more questions. Like 2017, you only had like not only like 29 children or something like that.
That's right.
But so since then, it's been really taken off. Those last, because that's when you started doing media stuff, isn't it?
No, correct. It was the New York Post that interviewed me for Father's Day, and they told me it's just going to be a nice Father's Day piece. They're interviewing a couple of different dads, but then they ended up putting me on the cover. And then once that happened, I was getting a lot of requests, not just from New York, but from all over the country and the world. So that's when I started to have a lot more children each year.
Yeah.
Oh, so did you only start in like the local area, like New York?
No, it was just in the United States, and then I believe I was. Yeah, I don't think I had any kids in Israel. Now I have 3 kids in Israel, but I have a daughter in Taiwan, and I have a son also in Southeast Asia, and then I had a daughter born in Africa in May.
Wow.
I was going abroad quite a bit, but most of the children that was conceived abroad was just going to fertility clinics abroad. But then the women would come back to the U.S. Fertility treatments. Well, fertility laws in the U.S. are very, very lax. So basically, any 2 people can just have a baby. It doesn't matter if they're a couple. It doesn't matter if they're together or not. You could just find someone off the street and then say, let's make the baby. So they might do some testing requirements, but the laws are quite lax. The issue is in the United States, it's just very expensive. The fertility doctors make $1 million a year, so it's unaffordable. So a lot of the women that I've helped in the U.S., if they were older and they needed fertility treatments, it was more cost effective to go abroad. So 2 weeks ago, I went to Mexico, but obviously the woman wasn't Mexican. She was from Texas, and we just went south of the border to use a fertility clinic there. But of course, I've been to fertility clinics in Europe as well. We went to Eastern Europe and Cyprus, and it's just anywhere you go for medical related things, it's considerably cheaper outside the U.S.
Yeah.
So this woman, this baby that I had in Africa was really also just a woman from the United States. She needed a surrogate and an egg donor, and that's very, very expensive in the United States. So I flew out there in September, and then with the egg donor and the surrogate and the doctor made the baby, and then the baby was born in May, and then the mom had to fly out to pick up the baby. Of course, it was right in middle of the pandemic when the baby was born, so the airports in Africa were closed, so she actually wasn't able to make it out to Africa till July to pick up her baby. So her baby lived in the hospital for 2 months, and she had to pay expensive daycare. Jeez. But it was still more affordable than it had been had she done it here in the United States.
Yeah. And
then she'll try and get some passports for the baby with the embassy, and then bring the baby back to the United States.
Yeah. I just want to ask, how'd you like come to the decision that you want to, I don't know, be a sperm donor? Just all of a sudden or whatever.
Well, you don't decide obviously to have 80 kids. So well, there was it really was 2 women that reached out to me initially, and it's funny because they both live maybe a mile from each other, but these kids, even though they're both the same age and they're both one's 12 and one's turning 12 in October, they couldn't be growing up in different lifestyles, and their situations were very different, but quite similar to a lot of the women that I helped. So one of them was a single woman who was just in her 40s, and she wasn't meeting anyone, and she wanted to start a family, and the other one was a lesbian couple. So you have these 2 brothers that are exactly the same age, and they have exactly the same father, but that's the only thing they have in common, because one has blue eyes and is Jewish and is growing up in Israel, and the other one is African American and has lesbian parents and is growing up in Chelsea. When you look at almost all of my kids, they have this sibling that's very, very close in age, but growing up very, very different lifestyles.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting.
That's so what you call it. I was going to ask, do you ever worry about like family structure that the kids you have grow up in?
Well, a lot of them do have 2 moms, so there's a 2-parent household that they're growing up in. And then, of course, I play a role in a lot of my children's lives, so some of them have 2 moms and a dad. Society already accepts, obviously, 2 moms and 2 dads, so it's not that big of a stretch to say 2 moms and a dad. And I think that even though I can't be a full-time father to my children, I think whatever I'm doing is still going to be better than perhaps an anonymous frozen donor least the child will know that I love them and care about them, and they'll know who I am and try and play a positive role. Of course, it's really up to the mom. So some of them want me to be more active than others. And then there's other kids that I just haven't met, and that's the way the mom likes it. Of course, it's dynamic and it changes. So it's possible that as the kids get older, that maybe the moms would change their mind. And I always leave the option on the table if they do want me to play a more active role.
Yeah.
So, you have done a lot of media, right? What would you say was your favourite or the most successful interview that you've done?
I get a lot of calls from the Maury Povich show. A lot of that apparently is very popular, and it's popular all around the world. It's the guy who does a regular talk show, but his gimmick is, he does paternity tests. So he says, "You are the father," or "You are not the father." So that was his shtick, and he did pretty well with that anyway. So I do get a lot of calls from that, but he didn't have a paternity test for me. What he did is he just brought a couple of the moms on and their kids, and then he had it as sort of like just a social sit down of me talking to Maury, and then they brought up the moms, and it was a little chit chat. So that was just in Connecticut. He films nearby, although I've done a couple shows in LA, which is a little more fun because I go out to the West Coast and they put me up in a hotel. And of course I have a sister there. And so those are generally more fun to do. But I think Maury was probably the most popular. And then I went a repeat for a couple of shows. I did the show called The Doctors a couple of times, and they wanted me to fly out. And I was like, I have an IVF the day they wanted me to fly out. I said I could come the next day. And they said, well, we need some footage. I said, just meet me at the clinic and you could film that. So they profiled this set of twins that I had in March of 2017 in Florida. So I was back on that show 3 times because once when we tried to make the baby, another time when the babies were born, and another time when she announced her pregnancy. And then I did To Tell the Truth. That was a fun game show. It's where 3 people come on and each of us are going to say we have 50 kids and only one of us is telling the truth. That would be me. And then there's like celebrity panelists that have to ask you questions and then see who's telling the truth and who's lying. And then I just did some news shows. I'm working on a documentary now. It's a nice couple. They were profiling my story in Israel, and they're doing a full feature documentary. And they're almost finished with that. I think they have to do some editing and then maybe a little bit more filming. But that should be out within the year.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, that's cool. Let's have a look. Oh.
Maybe you could help me. They're still working on a name for the documentary. What do you think a good name for the documentary would be?
Is it just exclusively about the Africa one situation?
No, they've interviewed a couple of them. They've interviewed a couple of the moms. They've interviewed, got together with a lot of the kids. So profile me in Israel and the legal troubles that I was having there. But then they've made 2 trips to the United States to profile a little bit of my life here. So I told them, listen, if it's another year before this comes out, they can name it 100 Kids and Counting because I'm already almost at 80. I figured that would be a good catchy name. But
100 Kids and Counting. That would be a good name.
Yeah, that's a good one.
I honestly can't think of another name. That's probably the best.
Well, most of them just call me the Sperminator, but I don't really particularly care for that name.
That's a fairly easy one to come up with.
That was the New York Post.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the Maury show. That's how I found out about you. That video has 1.5 million views.
Jeez.
Yep, and I get that makes sense, and of course that's just the video from YouTube. I'm sure obviously it's been on the network TVs as well, Facebook and other social media. So you would have to multiply that by many millions, I would imagine, because it's playing on network TV.
Yeah,
that's mental.
Well, what was your least favorite interview then? If you have one, you might not have one.
Of course, not this one. This one's very, very nice. I probably should have listened to some of your other podcasts.
No, it's
But
fine.
okay. Least favorite interview. I did Dr. Drew on CNN, and he was nice. Obviously, he's a combative. It's a tough love kind of interview. But I didn't like it because I just went into their studios in the Time Warner Center here in New York City. But I was sitting in a room by myself, and then, of course, there was a whole panel of people asking me questions, but I couldn't see any of them. All I see is a room alone in the camera, so I wasn't able to see who I was talking to, and I
Oh
really
yeah.
don't care for those interviews. I much prefer, at least if it's going to be on TV, to be able to see who I was chatting with.
Yeah, yeah.
But I went on his show. I went on his show twice, although I think it's since been canceled. So I don't think I still have a clip of that.
Oh. Wait. Dr. Drew.
Dr. Drew on CNN.
Oh, okay, yeah,
He had
yeah.
a show. He had like he was popular in New York for doing a sex call-in show. People would ask sex advice, but then he transitioned into a regular news program on CNN with like Anderson Cooper, and he was just one of these time slots on CNN.
Yeah, yeah. Let's have a look. The questions. Okay. Eddie, you got any?
Yeah, I was going to ask this one. As somebody of British origin myself, now living in Australia, as I have most of my life, the Piers Morgan, what did you think of that? Because I saw the clip of that in the documentary or series. It wasn't too nice about it. What do you think?
Everyone, when they read an article online and then they wait, it sounds very, very weird. But more often than not, if you watch the full unedited clip of the interview, typically towards the end, they come around and say what I'm doing is much more natural and much more like a traditional family than maybe some woman who's going to open a book and then flip through the pages of the book and then find someone who should be their children's father that then the kid will never end up knowing. That's much more uncomfortable and weird. So he was initially thinking that what I was doing was very creepy, but if you really want to think what creepy is, that's creepy. It's just strange and it's unnatural. So I think by and large most of them come around, but I did a couple of media shows in England, and I enjoyed their humor. I thought it was pretty funny. I don't know. I thought it was a good interview. And of course, obviously, no one wants to watch an interview where they're just going to ask softball questions. Sometimes they want to see a little bit of conflict. But I do think at the end, he sort of came around. I think a lot of times they're puzzled at what my motivation is of why I do it. But ultimately, in the end, they do see why the mothers would want to choose someone where they could actually meet and have a cup of coffee with the guy who's going to be the father of their children.
Yeah.
So, has it been going like exponentially the amount of kids you have each year, or did it like spike one year and now it's less?
This is the best year yet. I've never had 20 kids in 1 year. So, of course, I have 2 kids with a due date of December 30th. So we don't know if they'll deliver on their due date or before. But if they do deliver in 2020, then I'm having 20 kids in 2020. And I never really had numbers like that. I think last year I had maybe 8 or 9. And part of that was just I had 2 sets of twins. But most of the time, the traveling, I think, slows it down a bit. I take a few months off to travel. Israel obviously slowed me down quite a bit because I would have had quite a few children in Israel had I not been banned, because I did make many, many trips there to help these women, and then none of them were able to move forward. Israel is quite forward-thinking and a very paternalistic country, so they have free fertility treatments for everyone in the country up until 45 years old. So a lot of women were reaching out to me for help, but then once that ban was instituted, I think that probably hurt my numbers a little bit. If I would have just stayed in New York, or if I didn't have that ban, I would have had a lot more children in Israel. The court cases brought me back a whole bunch of times, which brought me away from helping me have children. But it's not growing exponentially. I think since I went to the media, I did I'm averaging probably 10 or 15 a year.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Is the because of like Corona and all that stuff this year, is the process like much different than it used to be of like doing it?
Yeah, well, I had some international trips canceled. I was supposed to go to Greece in April, and that flight was canceled. And I was supposed to go back in June, and then it was, of course, they banned the United States from entering Europe. So, in some ways, my international trips have been more challenging. But of course, domestically, the airports never closed down. And not only that, but flights got very, very affordable. So
Yeah.
last weekend, I went to Florida for my daughter's birthday party, and I never would have flown, 1,000 miles just to go to a birthday party, because the costs would have been unaffordable, but the flight was only $12. So I was like, for $12, let me go to my daughter's birthday party. And
$12?
That's cheap as. What the hell?
Yeah, that's amazing.
yes, very affordable, and it included luggage for that price. So it's very, very flights around the United States, in any case, are very, very cheap now since COVID. So I had women that all over the country who, when normally they didn't, they've been reaching out to me for years, but of course we never got to meet. Now they see these dirt cheap flights. They're like, oh, can you please come out to Houston? We'll pay for your flight, because the flight's only going to be 20. I flew to California. My flight was $25.
That's crazy. Damn.
Yeah, because I had to go to Mexico for this IVF 2 weeks ago, and I crossed the border over California. Yeah, then the border in Mexico is open. I think Canada's closed, but the southern border was open.
Yeah.
So it's actually in some ways been a little busier, and
more time to meet.
Yep, and also I don't have work, so because I'm teaching online. So normally I don't have the flexibility in my schedule to travel, and so they would have to come to New York. But now that I'm teaching online, I could really teach from anywhere.
Yeah. Do your students know about that, or do you tell them up front, or do they just find out by themselves or something?
Yeah, my students don't. I doubt any of my students know. I mean, not unless they Google me. Usually they might check my reviews online, but I don't think any of my students this semester know. So unless I mention it to them, they don't know. And of course, whenever I do media, I don't mention the school I teach at, because I don't think they appreciate being known for this. I think they'd rather be known for excellence in education, perhaps. But sometimes when I'm teaching statistics and I'm teaching binomial probability, I might use an anecdote of, well, if I had 80 kids, what are the chances that there'll be 40 boys and 40 girls? And, and we could do a Pascal's triangle or do something along the lines to tie it into the lesson. But I'm not keeping it a secret, but I don't advertise it either.
Yeah, it'd be funny if one of your students just, if you just had a teacher and you found out he had 80 kids randomly. That would be...
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. Let's have a look.
Last year at this time, I was in Asia. Well, I guess it was August, so I'm off in the summer anyway. And they did not allow this country in particular. See, what happened was I flew out there in June to make the baby, but then the woman was on her period, so I couldn't help her, because obviously I only went for a couple of days. So I said, listen, I can't fly out every month if your cycle's not regular. But she was nervous because I think the stress from my visit maybe delayed her cycle, whatever it was. I said, it's a very, very long flight and it's expensive. And of course she reimbursed me for the flight, but I felt bad. So I said, listen, we need to use a clinic where I can freeze the sperm and then the doctor can just put it in when you're fertile. But this country in particular didn't allow it unless you were married. So I actually flew back in August and then got married just so that we were able to go to the clinic. And it was a long, tedious affair because I ended up having to go to the U.S. Embassy in the capital just to get an affidavit saying I was single. Then I had to go to the translation service. Then I had to go to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Then I had to go to the courthouse. Then I had to go to the clinic. In the end, the process took a couple of weeks just to get that done. But during that time, she ended up saying, I think I'm fertile right now, and we tried on our own, and she ended up getting pregnant. So in the end, I did that whole process for nothing because she ended up getting pregnant without the clinic. But of course, if she ever wants to have more children, that baby was born in April, if she ever wants to have more children, she'll always be able to go back to the clinic and grow her family, and I wouldn't have to make additional trips.
Yeah. When was that? Was it?
That was August. So the baby was born in April, and I went there in August to make the baby.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then from there, that's when I went to Africa to do the surrogate there.
Yeah. Oh.
So you look at these two siblings, one's growing up in Asia and one's growing up in Africa. Of course, they're born less than a month apart, right? And
Yeah.
they're also going to have very, very different lifestyles. They're different races. They're speaking different languages. They're different religions. I mean, you name it, they're different. They have nothing in common. The only thing they really have in common is really their father, and then of course their birthday. But I'm confident that in the future they will meet and they get to know each other. Of course, a lot of my kids do get together regularly. So I have for my birthday, a lot of them got together with me. I turned 45 last week. And I got together with a whole bunch of my kids, but then of course for the kids' birthdays too. So this Saturday I have a birthday, and there'll be a lot of one of my daughters is turning 6, and she'll have a whole bunch of other 5 and 6 year olds of my other children that'll be joining for the birthday party.
Yeah, nice. So do
you know, some of the kids are only children, so a lot of the moms really want to foster sibling relationships because sometimes they reached out to me when they were too old, so giving their child a brother or sister wasn't really an option, so they're happy to have their child know their brothers and sisters, so they're not going to feel like an only child.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. I think it's good that you try and get to know all of them. Probably make them feel
well, I enjoy it. You know, I'm not staying up at night with bottle feedings generally, so I really do feel like very often I'm doing a lot of the fun stuff. So I enjoy it, and even obviously, I was babysitting this weekend because one mom had to go out, so I do a lot of that. Or sometimes I'll take the kids for the weekend. Obviously, it's limited what I can do. The more children I have, but you know, whatever they lose in from not having a full-time father, perhaps maybe they'll gain from having a lot of brothers and sisters.
Yeah. Well, you got anything to say, Eddie?
No, not really. Not now.
Dang. Well,
it's a lot.
How about? Oh wait, yeah. Go ahead. You go ahead.
No, I was just. I got in the mail this week a book somebody wrote, and he said he put me in his book. I think it's called Sperm Tales. But apparently he interviewed me, but I don't remember the interview, but he did mail me a copy of the book, so I just got that in the mail this week. I'm excited to read it.
Damn. Is it weird, like, having heaps of people know you and all that?
Hey, you know, but it's like I'm not really famous. I think I'm too poor to be famous, you know. So I feel like fame should come with some kind of monetary contribution. But you know, none of the media that I'm really doing is paying anything. I'm certainly not getting reimbursed for this interview, although it's been enjoyable chatting with you. But this guy didn't give me proceeds from his book, although I probably should have wrote a book. I think that should be, you know, it's been a while since I read a book. I'm reading a lot of Facebook messages, but that would be helpful. In fact, the day it went to the cover of the New York Post, and then a lot of the international media picked it up, I did get contacted by a lawyer who wanted to represent me and said, you need to write a book. Maybe one of my kids will write a book. My son's applying for university, and he wrote that in his college essay, you know, about how he has 68 younger brothers and sisters that he now has to be a role model for, and how he wants to do the right thing. So it was quite well written, and I enjoyed reading it. And then it's funny because the first person that contacted me was this lawyer who wanted me to write a book and represent him. And then the next person who contacted me also that same day was just the porn industry, who said, "Oh, we want you to do a porn," you know. And I was like, well, I said, that's ridiculous. I mean, I had a job. I'm teaching mathematics in a university. I was like, I can't do that. But then they were sending me pictures of the models that I'd be hooking up with. I was like, well, maybe it's not such a terrible idea. I mean, I do have a lot of mouths to feed, you know, so.
Yeah. Fair enough. Damn. I reckon you could write a good book. You got a fair few experiences. That would make an interesting book.
Yeah, I do, and of course the story's still quite dynamic, and
still going on.
It still is. Although I turned 45 this week, so I don't think I'm going to be doing this forever. Obviously, I'm not going to be helping women grow their families when I'm 50. So I was just talking about it with my dad because he actually showed up for the circumcision. My family's not so accepting of my lifestyle, and I think they're in many ways ashamed of what I do, although I still have a very close relationship with them. But I was thinking about when he stopped, and my dad stopped having kids when he was 46. So I'm thinking maybe that's not a bad year to call it quits.
Yeah. Well, I mean, your numbers are up there already, so you make a good mark on the world.
I think so, and of course I already a bit off more than I can chew. So I think that doesn't mean that even though I'm not helping women grow their families, I'll be very, very busy just helping to, try and play a positive role in all of my existing children's lives.
Yeah. Well, you got any questions, Eddie?
The only one I was thinking of was like child support and stuff like that. How's that going? Still?
Well, the vast majority of the women were honest and never went back on their word and support the children on their own. There were a few women that went back on their word and filed for child support, and I do support 9 of my children via the courts. Of course, I try and do whatever I can for the other children. So probably just this week, I bought well over 1,000 diapers. I was just trying to mail a case of diapers to the new kids that I have this month, and it adds up.
Yeah.
I went to a department store this week and just to buy some toys for the kids, just so that when I show up, I'm not showing up empty-handed. Of course, they were cheap slime toys, but of course, it still adds up because when you're buying 60 or 70 of them, everything gets expensive. So unfortunately, there's very limited amount that I can do to help support my kids financially. But the reason for that being is mostly because the vast majority of my income is already going to these 5 moms that sued me. So in that sense, I've certainly, I don't feel poor. My car just shut off. I got to my destination, so I'm switching over. I'm actually just stopping off at another kid's home, and I have 3 kids that I'm going to be bringing some of those presents that I bought.
Yeah. Well,
we'll let you go then.
Yeah, we'll let you go then. Thanks for. We've ran out of questions.
No, that's okay. And even though I'm very, very poor financially, I certainly feel very blessed and very rich. Obviously there's all different gauges of what wealth is, and I got a lot of joy in my life, and I certainly have a lot of people that love me and that I love them, and so I'm not really suffering in that sense.
Yeah, well, I reckon that's the way to go. It's better to be happy than rich and not happy.
Yeah, and then of course I know this coronavirus has been devastating. We had over 100,000 deaths in the United States, but for me it's been nothing but wonderful, just not having to go to work and being able to catch up and spend so much time with my children. I was out of the country for 3 months because I was traveling in January and February to helping women. I went to Belgium and Hungary and Czech Republic and Slovakia and Argentina and Peru, and then back to Israel. And I was just all over the world traveling because that's my winter break. And then, of course, I got back in March, and because I had to teach my spring semester. And then just when I got back, the school was canceled. So then I was able to really spend a lot of quality time. And it was nice not having to go to work. And I had moms that still had to go to work, so they were asking me to babysit, and I was able to step up to the plate and be able to help out, and just be able to go visit kids that I haven't seen in a long time, and they didn't have school either, so we were all able to just spend time. Of course, we're all teaching or taking classes online, but we all know how that goes.
Yeah.
Well, that's nice.
Thank you for coming on. It's been a pleasure. This was Gex Talk 18. Thank you for listening.
I have no kids in Australia yet, but maybe after this interview, I do have a woman that keeps on reaching out to me from Australia, but but obviously my penis isn't long enough to reach there, so we have to wait till the borders are open.
Yeah.
Well, okay, it was a pleasure. Be well. Nice chatting with you guys.
See ya.
Okay, be well, mates.